Thank you. Please take a seat. And also a quick reminder, even though we are all adults and we know it, having attended so many conferences and webinars, can we put our phones on silent mode, please? Thank you. Yeah. Please. We are about to begin our 27 Trialogue 2047. And may I please request Dr. Ashok Khosla, Chairman of the Development Alternatives Group, to inaugurate the session with the gong, please, sir.
I want to welcome you all to a meeting of our Trialogue. This is the 4th or 5th year that we've been having these Trialogues. Why are they called Trialogues? Because they are beyond dialogues. They are essentially to bring together the issues, which we might call a trilemma, that afflict our planet, which always come in threes and threesomes. For example, government and private sector and civil society have very different views about what needs to be done and what can be done. We try to bring them together. The same basically applies to bringing together economists who have a lot to account for, and scientists and humanities people, artists and people who have insights about the human condition to be able to exchange ideas. So this is a new generation of trialogues, which we will begin today for this coming year. And because of the World Water Day, we decided to have the first one relating to water. And what more appropriate symbol of water is there in the animal kingdom, particularly, than a dolphin? Now, it so happens that this building has been designated by the dolphins of the world as their embassy. It's called the Dolphin Embassy. And this gong says that, Dolphin Embassy. It's made out of 7 noble metals, ranging from platinum and gold to most noble of them all, silver. And it has a sound, a gong sound, that basically is cosmic. It's the origin of the syllable Om, which you will hear. When I strike it, it will ring for about 5 minutes, and we won't stop listening for 5 minutes, but you will hear a very profound bass tone, which represents the signal of the Earth, the so-called Schumann frequency, which is essentially our connection to the cosmos. And today we're going to spend an hour and a half talking about water in many different aspects. And I thought it would be a good way, instead of lighting a lamp, which is our usual way to do things in India, to actually sound a gong. So if you'll permit me, I'm going to strike the gong and let you hear the original cosmic Om. When the upper frequencies die out, you will hear the Om in your ears. So, Swam, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this frequency is going to stay with us throughout. I'm Swam Prabha, and I'm leading the policy work here with DA under the able guidance of Dr. Khosla and the team here that we have. A very well welcome to one and all here. Your presence is of great, great pleasure. And it's a commitment that we are doing together here to see you all here together. We are here for the 27 Trialogue 2047, a series of intellectual encounters that envisions India's journey and development in 100 years. The Trialogue is a flagship event of the Development Alternatives Group to build a community of people aware and concerned with the issues of sustainable development in India. This is achieved through engaging a large multidisciplinary audience, including youth, in conversation with eminent speakers who can provide a diverse set of views and insights, bringing out a varied set of perspectives. DA has been holding the Trialogue since 2013, focused at building consensus on directions and measures India must take to accelerate a transition towards a more sustainable future. This platform aims to create a shared understanding on changes which could be systemic, which could be structural, institutional, and also behavioral, that would be required for our economic, political, and social systems at play. Through the Trialogue, we intend to move away from the conventional format of debate, as already been stated by Dr. Khosla. And this is a more challenging and inclusive dialogue that we would like to promote through the Trialogue, with the triple bottom line of economic growth, social equity, and environment sustainability at its core. With this, I now invite our Honorable CEO, Mr. Patara, to deliver his welcome address.
No problem at all. Thank you so much, Swam. I see smiles across the room, and I don't know why I feel elated, energized by your presence here. Thank you all for being with us this afternoon. In previous incarnations of my journey at Development Alternatives, which now is crossed 36 years, one of the designations that I've been given is Chief Disruption Officer. And I think the reason why people would do that was that on occasions like this, I'd go off on a tangent and say all the wrong things. So thank you, Swam, for the note that I have here. I promise to refer to it, because I think what we want to talk about today is of extreme importance. Water, as both Dr. Khosla and Swam have already pointed out, is life. It's life-giving. And perhaps, or at least in my view, I think it's the one element of nature that needs to be nurtured the most and most actively with, not just our minds, but our hearts and bodies and everything that we do in the world. So it's with I think that level of responsibility that our organization has thought about water and has tried to develop the kind of solutions that would make water in the quantities that we need it, of the quality that we need it, available to future generations. It struck me a year ago or so that children born now would be alive in the year 2100, are likely to be, given the lifespans that we have. And on the one hand, it was exciting, but it was also a frightening thought, because given the amount of distress we already have with respect to elements such as water, the thought that in the year 2100, large sections of society, particularly in water-stressed areas, whether it's the hugely populated Gangetic Belt or it's the deserts of Rajasthan and many other places in the world, might not have water at all, certainly put a scare into me. And I think it's those kind of thoughts, along with many other positive ones in terms of solutions that we could find, that should spur us into action. I won't take too much time going over, the subject, because, that's what our esteemed panelists in the Trialogue will talk all about. But I would like to mention once again that 12 years ago, when it was 35 years to 2047, a generation, if you like, when we conceived of the Trialogues, the idea was very, very simple, that we have to get people together across sectors, so public, private, community. We need to discuss the past, the present, and the future. We need to look at planet, what the planet needs. We need to look at what people need, but also look at prosperity. And it's these triads that helped us conceive what we would like the Trialogues to be like. And we've made sure in each and every edition of the Trialogue that gets reflected in the thoughts that you'd hear. So thank you, panelists, once again. Development alternatives, in terms of our commitment to taking care of water and taking care of nature, has had a very long track record. As far back as the late 1980s, we set about to transform the landscape of Bundelkhand, which since that time we've called our Karm Bhumi. It's an area, a particularly poor, resource-starved area of the country that we've committed ourselves to as an organization by way of transformation, socio-economic and environmental. And as far back as the late 80s, we set about to make water available. Through check dams, we built about 170 of them, but also all manners of water retaining structures, etc., that would make water available to people for even as basic a need as drinking, but then also for purposes of irrigation. The effect was indeed transformational. There were villages that went from 1 crop to 3 crops within a space of a few years. Incomes went up, etc. There was much more security and eventually surplus in what was happening in those local economies. Beyond that, and if I fast forward to what we're doing today, we've taken it upon ourselves to launch a mission of sorts to rejuvenate water bodies. In the past year, we've done over 55 water bodies, most of which are in Uttar Pradesh. But our ambition on this account is so strong that in this year, the coming year, we want to take that up, increase it by a factor of 10 and look at least 500. But that's, in terms of what we would want to do ourselves. The learning on account of the water bodies that we've been rejuvenating in these last couple of years has been so profound that we've already embarked upon an initiative to intensify the learning, not just from our own projects, but from other projects as well, and then to transfer this know-how to partners, share, I shouldn't say transfer, my apologies, share this know-how with other partner organizations, with governments, etc., who are also committed to taking care of water bodies. So on this day, World Water Day, where we're looking at where the global theme is leveraging water for peace 2024, we are making a commitment as an organization to look at the profound nature of what water means, not just as a resource, but in terms of the effect water availability can have on communities and how it can transform their lives and indeed lead to more peaceful societies, flourishing societies where people fulfill their dreams and aspirations. I should stop now in terms of the subject, but it is an honor, a privilege for me to welcome our speakers. Shri Suresh Prabhu, Honorable Member of Parliament, is with us today. Suresh Prabhuji, thank you very much for being so generous with your time, joining us again today. He's a true champion of the environment and has served in that capacity as Minister of Environment in previous governments, influenced not just thought, but action on environment and issues of climate change within India, but I think in a sense, even more importantly, globally, which has led to several steps being taken by governments across the world, and of course, multilateral institutions. It's also an honor for me to welcome Ms. Hyun Ban, who heads who's the Chief of Social Policy at UNICEF in India. Thank you very much for being with us today. UNICEF, as all of you would know, is at the forefront of providing access to ensuring access to clean water and safe sanitation facilities with, I think, a very strong commitment to once again the future, the lives that future generations will lead and the quality of those lives, and particularly with respect to resources and access to water. They have supported the Government of India's flagship programs, the most directly relevant ones being the Swachh Bharat Mission, the Jal Jeevan Mission, and WASH activities in schools. We'd like to thank UNICEF and your leadership for having done that within India. We're also delighted to welcome Dr. Debolina Kundu, the Director of NIUA, the National Institute of Urban Affairs, focuses on research capacity building and policy advocacy to address challenges of urbanization, where I think all of you will agree, stress related to water is becoming increasingly acute. The city of Bangalore has been in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons over the last week to 10 days. And NIUA and Dr. Kundu herself are playing a prominent role in, again, galvanizing thought across a broad spectrum of stakeholders towards addressing the challenges that we face. It's my pleasure to also welcome Dr. Nidhi Pundhir. Nidhi is the Vice President Global of CSR in the HCL Foundation and heads the foundation's activities. Development Alternatives has had the good fortune of working with the HCL Foundation now for almost a decade, not just in projects related to water, but also skill development, renewable energy, etc. And we thank you, for you and your foundation's leadership in that direction. The transformational effect that the HCL Foundation's work has had on rural areas would be well known to most of you. And at Development Alternatives, we certainly cite it as an example in terms of a corporate commitment to transformation of rural communities. Thank you, Nidhi, for being with us. And of course, Dr. Ashok Khosla, may I welcome you to the Trialogue, if I could say so. We've benefited from your vision and all the support that you've given us for all these years. And we'd like to, during the conversation, hear your thoughts on the subject as well. Dr. Arun Kumar might not be online, so yeah. Thank you all. I'm sorry I took far too much time, but welcome all of you once again to the Trialogue, and I hope we have a fruitful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat. It gives me immense pleasure to now invite Shri Suresh Prabhu, Honorable Member of the Parliament, to deliver the keynote address, please. Sir.
Okay. So thank you very much. And I really thank my dear friend, a young man, Dr. Ashok Khosla, for inviting me for this program. I always believe that Dr. Khosla is one person army, one man army, who keeps fighting for good causes. But in war, normally when you say army, there is a war. But his war is against all evils, not to eliminate somebody, but if at all to get away from somebody's mind, it's the ignorance. So thank you very much. And therefore, I believe that there is no alternative to Ashok Khosla. So development is an alternative, but there is no alternative to him. So I really thank him for inviting me for this program. And I always would have loved to visit such a beautiful premises where you are all now. But unfortunately, I have to deny that opportunity to myself because I am not able to come to this place. But nonetheless, thank you very much for inviting me and making this a grand program on Trialogue. In Indian mythology, our own system, our own faith, we believe the Trinity. We believe that Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh are necessary for sustenance creation, sustenance, and probably elimination of something which is wrong. I think the trialogue is the right form of ensuring that we get all three key elements of society together to debate, discuss, and also chart out a plan of action. I have seen something like this happening when I was handling one of the very controversial projects that Government of India ever undertook, that was interlink of rivers. And that was in the previous Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, where I had 6 cabinet positions. Of course, I had another 4 or 5 under Modi ji. But at that time, I remember Ashok Khosla used to organize some such programs which actually helped to bring together a sort of a action points which will eliminate all the misgivings and also work on some of the positives. So thank you very much for this. Anyway, the big challenge that we are facing, and I'm happy that you are linking it to 2047, that would mean India would have completed 100 years of independence. And at that time, what would be the scenario of water? And how do you face that? I would say challenge. Why challenge? Because when you say water, it's a very, very interesting phenomena in water, is that too much water is a problem and no water is obviously a problem. It is like wealth. When you have too much of wealth, it's a problem. Not for those who have too much wealth, they will consider themselves fortunate, but they have their own problems. And those who have nothing, they obviously have a problem for survival. And therefore, water is actually in a same side of a situation in which when people have no water, there is a problem. But too much water is also not a happy affair. In fact, we have seen that when there is floods, there are floods, the people kind of challenge they face are enormous. In fact, the entire infrastructure gets washed out. And therefore, between drought and flood, if you have to choose, somebody might say floods are better, but not always, because they can actually take away everything that you have. And therefore, too much water is a problem. No water is obviously a problem. And therefore, how do you actually make sure that we create a situation that we have enough for all, but not too much in a situation? Now, India has a very typical geographical terrain. We have so much of water, if not say so much, but much more than rest of the country in Brahmaputra, and almost nothing in Penar Basin, which is in the south. So just imagine one country, one geographical entity, one sovereign country, and so much of disparity. But that's how the nature has created a world. There is so much of water in Southern America and almost nothing in some part of Asia. There is so much in Canada, which has only maybe 33 million people or 34 million by now, and hardly, there's so much water. So this is how the nature has created disparity. That does not mean that when there are more people, obviously water will follow you. In fact, conversely, it's true that people have followed water. And that's how the civilizations grew around the banks of rivers. Because when they found rivers, the civilization settled there and they grew there. And therefore, now the problem that we are going to face in 2047 is lack of water for sure. Because by 2047, and I think Dr. Khosla and his colleagues were thinking about it, because 100 years from independence, so let's look at, say, 75 years back, when we became independent, and by the time 2047 arrives, India's population in that 1 century would have become 3.5 to 4 times more. So per capita availability, even if the water availability was the same as was in 1947, even then the per capita availability of water would be under severe stress. And therefore, one part of the challenge is more people. The second part of the problem is, which is now worse confounded, is by climate change. Climate change, the one big effect on climate change is on water. And that would mean that may be too much water and there may be no water. There may be a situation in which it might rain for days together, and maybe a situation where it may not have water, the rains may not come for years together. And in that situation, how do you manage it? And that's a big challenge of India has to face. One of the important elements that we must keep in mind is that when we have such disparity, in any case, even if in the normal monsoon, how much water do you get in a year? Normally, monsoon in India is about 4 months. And in that 4 months, the water that falls the rain that comes in and the water that we get from the rain, it's almost not more than 15 days in a year that good quality rain really falls. And that would mean that we have to use that 15 days water for the remaining 350 days, or even if there is failure of monsoon, then even longer period. The point is, therefore, nature also realized it, and they created the reservoirs for water, the rivers, the lakes, various parts of that was part of the reservoir. The nature also said that we store the water in this way. But now, in this climate change, which has really altered the entire ecosystem in a way irrevocably, we have to find out the best way of storage of water. And that will be one water security related angle that we must keep in mind. Our per capita storage of water is probably 1/20th, 1/5 of what US has got. US or maybe US maybe 20 times more. Even what our neighbor China has got. And therefore, we must therefore make sure that in water, planning for future, we must keep in mind how do you make sure that nature, what it gives us, how do you store it? In any case, India, unlike US, bulk of our water precipitation that happens is through rain and not so much of snow melting. And therefore, much of it, we must make sure that how do you optimize utilization of what falls from the skies, how do you save it and use it for longer period. Another point that really 2047 we have to see is that India's many of these rivers which provide us water, because when it comes from the skies, the rivers captures it and take it and flow it into the other streams. We are in a situation, some of our rivers, upstream and downstream, we share it with our neighbors. And therefore, it has international ramifications. It has how do you actually make sure that water management in India actually takes into account that aspect of how do you share water with our neighbors in the neighborhood. So that's one part. The second part is that when too much water falls, as it always happens in case of Brahmaputra, there are huge floods which actually ravages the entire system. And therefore, how do you bring in flood control as a measure of water management? That is not new thing that has been planned for many, many decades, even before independence, incidentally. But point is, how do you actually bring all these key elements? Then in climate change, we have a big problem. One of the cause of climate change, incidentally, is using of fossil fuels, hydrocarbons. So non-fossil fuel energy is one of the important elements of that. So can we therefore harness hydroelectricity? Of course, somebody might even say, which is true, that when hydroelectricity through dams has own consequences to nature and other issues. Also, the methane, which emits, also one of the greenhouse gases, incidentally, is also because of storage, and therefore we must keep that in mind. But still, water management is going to be one of the crucial aspects of India when it reaches 100 years to meet the aspirations of people in India. Other point, as I've mentioned very importantly in this dialogue, is planet. We must always keep in mind that Dr. Khosla, he has studied science, he went to various top universities, but actually the limitation of science in water management and probably water creation. You cannot create water. You can desalinate it, you can recycle it, but you cannot manufacture it in a way. And therefore, nature is the only source of water. And planet, if you don't care for it, the water availability will not be there. And therefore, we must also keep some water, not just for our own consumption alone, but also for planet. If you don't feed planet enough water, probably that entire cycle of nature will get disrupted and there may not be any water. And therefore, planet is very, very important to create water, but also to nourish the system so that we continue to get water in future. So the element of this is people. Obviously, people need water. And incidentally, when you say people, it all depends upon disparity of people. Now in India, the farmers constitute the bulk of India's population. Agriculture consumes more than probably 80% of the water in India, maybe 85%. And therefore, we have to think into various ideas that people have to be cared, but we must also ensure that they use water very judiciously. And therefore, the cropping pattern will be another angle that we must keep in mind while considering India 2047, because water is necessary for food. It actually for subsistence of people, for livelihood, for farmers. But if you don't have food, there will not be any survival for anybody. If there is no water, there will not be survival for nature or us. Therefore, all will be gone. So make sure that we use this availability of water coming from planet in a manner that will ensure a proper equality. Or I would say not equality really, because nature has not created equal water resources in any case. At least judicious and proper, thoughtful management of the resource. So we have to be very, very concerned about this situation that is emerging, in which we'll have a big challenge and already there, but it will become even more manifesting itself into a big, probably a catastrophic challenge. So we must work on that. I really know that there are some others who are going to speak, so I will stop here. But I once again thank Dr. Khosla for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for those thought-provoking words. Indeed, we have to be so careful about how we use our water. And that takes us to the next part of our trilogue. And today it gives me immense pleasure to invite our esteemed speaker for the evening. May I please invite Ms. Hyun. She is the Chief Social Policy Officer for UNICEF India. Ma'am, please. Dr. Debolina Kundu, Director, NIUA. Ma'am. Ms. Nidhi Pundhir, she is the Vice President, Global CSR, HCL Foundation. I also would like to invite Dr. Ashok Khosla, sir. May I also invite Pat to please join us. And Zeenat, Niazi, she is our Senior Vice President and our Chief Knowledge Officer. I'm handing this session over to you, Zeenat, to moderate. Please, audience.
We are almost good evening time. So good evening, everybody. And thank you very much for being here. I have the pleasure, the privilege, and the scary space to be the moderator for this session with very eminent panelists, which incidentally are all women. I must point this out, although the stage is balanced. Water needs a revolution, and there is a short poem, Aayega Inqalab, Pehen ke chudi, bindi or hijabs. So the revolution will be brought in by women. So let me begin with that. Today's discussion, these are not my words, incidentally. This I've sort of taken from a poem by somebody I follow. And today's Trialogue 2047, I will not introduce what Trialogue is. We've all heard of it. And I thank Suresh Prabhuji for emphasizing that when we bring the multi-stakeholders in, a very important stakeholder is the planet. And we bring the views of the planet in here as well. And today's conversation may be seen as an entwined braid. So we are with multiple strands, and each strand with many threads. And we are going to untwine these strands. We are going to unbraid the discussion and then rebraid as we go through. And we hope we'll find new ways to connect in that rebraiding. The local, the global, the national, the different kinds of viewpoints. And with that, I begin. Yeah, and let me begin first really with Nidhi. So what I'll do is I'll take you through a set of questions, and maybe those questions will lead to some others, and we'll open the floor for the conversation with the audience. So we start with you, Nidhi. Thanks again. Yeah, and we are very proud to be associated with the HCL Foundation, and we know the HCL Tech won the National Water Award in the industry for CSR activities. So we know that commitment and for the efforts that you are making. And with that many years that you began working with in this place with communities, there is a lot of partnerships that you've developed. I think the significant one being with the National Mission for Clean Ganga, which is a very, very major initiative of the Government of India. So how do you see the HCL Foundation and, of course, the larger corporate role in shaping the discourse of water conservation in India? Because we normally feel that the corporate sector has been, in a sense, seen as an adversary because of the image it has. But things are changing. So how do you see that discourse being shaped by?
Thanks, Zeenat, and once again, a happy, Global Water Day to everyone, and thanks Development Alternatives for inviting us. I think it's a very relevant discourse that we are having on a very important day today, and the question to me, of course, and I'll come to that. But as we just heard, the importance of water and the struggle that we are all having, I think for us as a corporate, the journey was never seen as though we're a tech company and we have to take it up in our ESG or CSR agenda, but it was very feeling driven. We are also 220,000 people working in HCL Tech, and we are also humans. So water is core, and many of our volunteers, they started their own journey. And I remember 9 years ago when I had joined HCL, they used to fill these water bowls for birds in the summers, and they used to paint them. And we used to travel from village to village. And that's when I was working in the international development space, but when we looked at our immediate neighborhood and we looked at the water bodies, they were definitely in a very, very bad shape. They were hardly kind of, to be, if you look at Gautam Buddha Nagar, I mean, we hardly saw a pond like a pond. So I think it was a very emotional journey for us that we started, and we never took an approach that we have to do it because there's a compliance. We did it because there was a clear need which we saw. But then I'll just kind of relate it back with something which around 15, 20 years ago, when I had worked in the drought situation in Rajasthan, when I was with Save the Children, there was this whole, from, I don't know, many of you may be remembering those days from 2000 till 2004, there was acute drought in Rajasthan. And I was posted there. And when we used to meet 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and talk to them about rain, they didn't know what rain is. So we were working from village to village, and we were trying to get this, DEPECO funding in those times. And the only option for us to even give cash for work or food for work to people was to rejuvenate the water bodies. So there was a lot of experience that we had. Some of us who joined HCL Foundation. And I remember that publication we did with children, it was called Barso Mahare Desh. Because 6 years old, 7 years old did not know what rain is. What does it look like? What is it to see a filled water body? Now, when you go back to Rajasthan, Ajmer side and Jaisalmer side, Bikaner side, when we see those pokhars and, talab, to we get that satisfaction that we did this work 20, 25 years ago. But the same story was here in Gautam Buddha Nagar in Noida, right in 2016-17 when we started our work. So we did our first census with the district administration. I walked into the DM's office and we said that, do we know the number of ponds that exist here? And that data was not there. And that was the time Jal Shakti mission and everything was coming up. Of course, we partnered with Namami Gange and all of that. And there was this whole thing that corporates which are sitting next to any river basin, can we do our own census? Can we at least know the state of health of water bodies that we have? At that time, we partnered with Intac and we did the survey. There were 1,700 big and small water bodies that we mapped. None of them had been rejuvenated. So then we offered the district administration that we will take up 50 and we will do that. We are ready. We are kind of, we'll invest and we'll take the risk. There was no notification. There was no guarantee these will remain water body or not. But I invite all of you to all these water bodies and see what biodiversity hotspots they are. In fact, last year, we released this Water, the Essence of Life publication at the UN Water Conference in US. And the question that you are asking, what drives us, what guides us, when we actually calculated, we had already saved 57 billion liters of water validated by external agencies, and we replicated the same model in all cities that we have been working. We went further, working with urnis, and experimented a lot, the bird islands and the nano bubblers, and everything in terms of technology. But I think the essence here is community participation. Essence here is extremely heavy volunteerism, ownership by the state, the public-private partnership model. And we never took that corporate kind of, but we took a very, very social and centric approach, which lied in the villages. And 8 years now, when we look back, I mean, it seems like something which was seeming impossible then, it has happened. And most of our volunteerism now happens next to these pond sites. So it's a little emotional story. And from the board to last, I would say E0, E1, all our employees are so much connected to this, and that keeps us going.
Thank you, Nidhi. I think that's a very, very good start to this conversation. We start with ourselves, our feelings and our emotions, and we look at how we, at the world immediately around us. It's really like saying we practice what we are preaching. So thank you so much. And I'm going to jump across in the panel to Dr. Kundu. From villages and communities to urban lands and cities. I refer to a very important work that NIUA did for the government of Delhi, for the city of Delhi, which was the leadership on the blue-green city plan that NIUA had led, which is still, in fact, sitting in the government, has not yet been notified, but in a sense has been a breakthrough in the way city planning can be seen. But even as this plan awaits notification, what, in your view, might be governance challenges? Because we deal with communities one-to-one, but at the level of governments, especially urban local bodies, what kind of challenges you see for ensuring that water conservation, blue-green issues, the demand-side management, all of these things become priority in urban planning, instead of land use and land monetization really driving urban planning? How do you see that the challenge here?
Thank you. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Development Alternatives for inviting me to this important session. See, from my experience in the urban sector for a few decades, what I understand is whenever we bring in the master plans or any statutory plans, you have a set of agencies which really formulate and some really deliver on the ground. So I think there needs to be more of synergy. So the development authority may construct, right? But when it goes to maintenance, it's the ULBs who pass the plans, or maybe at times the development authorities, and it's the RWAs just now in the big cities, or maybe the individuals in the smaller cities who really need to comply with. So in case of Delhi, I think a big role in the absence of what committees in a big way, it lies basically with the RWAs when we talk about compliance and within the housing societies. And that is one thing. And the other thing, when we look at monitoring and enforcement, again, there are siloed interventions. So until and unless all agencies come together on a single platform, discuss the challenges and come up with solutions in an integrated manner, I think things won't work. We really need to come together on issues which are very common to all of us. And today in the morning, we had a session I think it's still going on climate sensitive urban planning, where Dr. Sudhir Krishna, the former Secretary of Ministry of Urban Development, and he's from the Karnataka cadre, and he is very well aware of how the problems in Bangalore city has come up, where he says that it's basically the irresponsibility of the city managers which has resulted in this problem. There is 30% of the water in the city is being misused. It's non-revenue water which we are losing. So until and unless we tap this, and if we are able to do so, I don't think there will be any crisis at all. So we need to look at that. And metering. He was also mentioning in most of the high-rise apartments, there's a lot of water wastage. So one needs to be mindful of that. Again, the role of individuals and the RWAs come up in a big way. So, and in the small towns, I believe the councillors also need to come in, where you do not have RWAs. The role of the councillors also become very important in not only maintaining the water bodies or rainwater harvesting, or for that matter, reuse of recycled water, but in the overall urban space. When you talk about urban management, either the role of citizens is important, and in addition to the citizens, the RWS and the councillors and the city management. I stop.
Thank you, Dr. Kundu, because it's so connecting. So you begin with the communities, and even at the city planning level, ultimately it boils down to how RWAs and really at that really small unit, things are being dealt with, and where are the spaces within the city planning arena for this conversation to happen of the RWAs or the neighborhood associations with the city planners and the managers. So there are no official conversation spaces in the sense, or even planning spaces that can. So I think that's a very telling point. And obviously all of this leads into the fact that we are fighting our way to say something about the SDGs, and that we are reaching the global goals, and we are at the global level and at the national level, at the local level, but we are not designing the processes for those SDGs to be internalized in institutional systems. So with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Ban on a larger sort of view. We've come a long way. MDGs wanted to half everything, and we didn't reach that half either. And we are now midway through the SDGs, and by all records, we haven't done great. Whether globally or nationally, we are just about in some of the goals reaching there. And the water crisis continues to loom. With respect to India, that UNICEF has been supporting for so many years, what do you think are still some unresolved issues that UNICEF is, sort of trying to address so that we can push this, whether it's at the community level or whether it's at the national social policy level?
Thank you very much. Namaskar. So thank you very much to Development Alternatives for this very important seminar, and very great to be sharing this panel with Ms. Pundhir from HCL Foundation, representing private sector, as well as NIUA, our close collaborator that works closely with the ministry. The theme you were talking about yesterday, today, tomorrow. So just on yesterday, this year is a 75th year of UNICEF being in India. So we have had this shared journey with the government of India around the water and sanitation sector. And it's a critical area that, let me just, in terms of the lesson and experiences, one is a community-based approach that you mentioned. In 1970, we supported the government around the water revolution, and it really started in India. So this is about providing easy to use, robust hand pumps that were designed with government with some technical support from UNICEF that is beyond the individual household, but can withstand the wear and tear of the community and provide safe water for the entire community. So really the community at the forefront driving the O&M. This model, it's called Mark II hand pump. And it's very interesting for me to be in India country office because I have actually been to remote parts of, let's say, South Sudan, outside of Juba, where I have seen this Mark II hand pump providing the clean water for the entire community, the children, the girls, the women in the communities, and also in the supply division based in Copenhagen, where I was tasked to work on a supply catalog to support the procurement services for many governments in Africa, elsewhere. And I used to see this Mark II hand pump, and now I'm in India. It was exported and used across 40 countries outside of India. So this is one contribution of India, the community-based approach. The second is gender, the gender consideration. In 1992, we also supported what's called women's hand pump mechanics. So really putting women at the forefront of the operation and maintenance of the hand pumps, but really giving an opportunity to be the lead in the community to pass on hygiene promotion messages. So, and there is a lot of gender consideration you need to make when we talk about WASH. We started looking at the issue of menstrual hygiene management. There's many girls and women who are not able to work or go to school, out of school, because they have that burden of fetching water from afar, right? So the gender consideration, I think, is an experience that we have been able to also replicate in other countries. Third is a multi-sectoral nature of water. So you talk about SDG 6 around water. Actually, water touches upon many, many SDG goals, from good nutrition, SDG 2, 3, health, education, 4, gender equality. So it's very multi-sectoral. So UNICEF, with the support of government, like the Ministry of Education, Health, have ensured that water is part of schools, health facilities, because it has multiplier effect on the development outcomes for children. The major shift, I'm wearing green today amidst all of the blue. The major shift that I would try to say that UNICEF is working on, the UNICEF WASH globally now, the water and sanitation sector, in the new strategic plan of 2022 to 2027, actually coordinates the whole climate change and environmental sustainability agenda for UNICEF, because it's considered very, very critical. Climate crisis is a child right crisis. 90% of the diseases that are caused by climate change impact are actually, under 5 are the biggest, they bear the biggest burden. And as UNICEF, we're really looking at the issue of climate resilience, adaptability across, different sectors, from WASH in health, WASH in schools. Second is ensuring that water is a core part of the multi-sectoral climate policy and climate finance agenda. I think it has to be really situated at the core. And then the third pillar is really having children and young people at the forefront of water conservation efforts, water quality monitoring, and just ensuring that it's part of the wider education curriculum. So at early on, they're able to really learn the value of water and why it's important to conserve. And then lastly, I think the honorable member talked about it, the green economy. There's huge potential to link, the skill, students and young people to actually be interested in the green sector, and the water will be a core. So there's a lot of shifts that are happening. So today, tomorrow, we're looking at that future. And I think children, and I'm glad that many speakers have talked about it, they would be the core, because really investing in children and water, you're investing in the future of India. And all, as I mentioned, it will have multi-sectoral multiplier effect across all of the SDGs. And of course, critical role of, and as Ms. Pundhir mentioned, private-public sector partnership. A lot of the things that I mentioned where UNICEF was supporting government, civil society, such as development pathway, have been critical in the overall, realization of these development agendas. So let me just stop here.
Thank you. And I'm going to actually reopen the second round with you again. Okay. So yeah, but let me start by saying the green is the new blue, because there is the green water, which if you don't balance, the blue water doesn't stay. And in fact, it's now the new way of looking at the planetary boundary of the freshwater change as well. So that's something that, very much is there. And you talk about children. UNICEF has always been associated with the future in that sense, because you work with the children. But one of the things that comes to my mind is that as you work with India, where do you see the critical institutional capability gaps? If you have to address this whole issue of equity for children, equity for tomorrow, intergenerational equity, and so there is the whole institutional framework. What kind of capabilities you see are key, which are required to go that way?
So, so I'm not a water expert, but what I can say is from the social policy side, what we have been talking about is importance of the technology around climate adaptation in the wash sector. So climate resilient wash systems, even toilets, wash facilities where the hand pumps that could withstand the multiple natural disasters that are caused by climate change, like flooding, the cyclones, water scarcity. For example, I mean, globally, the figure is very, very worrying. Over 920 million children are at risk due to water scarcity. I think 400 million children live in regions where they're prone to cyclones. And then 240 million children are living in coastal areas where, flooding is an impact. So we really need to invest in climate adaptation and, having that technology also taught at an early age, I would say. And then I think areas in the education curriculum, climate change has to be very, very strongly focused, but things like STEM that will contribute to really looking at innovative technologies to ensure that all of these facilities are resilient, and also looking broadly at the climate policies and I would say, as I mentioned, climate financing, but also the disaster the loss and damage fund that I think even during the G20 we talked about. We have to link these two. There's huge opportunities to untap some of the financing to invest in climate mitigation and adaptation. So I would maybe point to those two.
Absolutely, I think important points, the education on one end and the financing on the other, and capabilities for that. So thank you for that. And in that sense, if I go back to you, Dr. Kundu, again, looking at cities as the strategic action areas, not just to adapt for the adaptation to the changing climate, but also to combat climate, because we're also the generators of the most GHGs in a sense, and mitigation through the efforts at the city level are important. So within the water management space, and looking at the whole arena of climate adaptation, strategies for mitigation, etc., what are the examples of governance shifts that you're seeing in the city governments in India, where some innovations are happening, where we see policy change, we might see new institutional measures. So, and NIUA being at the forefront of this, how do you see these important things that we can benchmark?
Thank you. I think it's a very important question. With the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission being launched in December 2005, I think that was the first time that such concerted reforms were launched both at the state level and city level. At the state level, there were 10 reforms, 13 at the state level, and lot of dedicated grants. AC, we called it AC, additional central grants, came to the cities for the first time. And the policymakers for the first time took a lot of interest in urban areas. And also water was one, although it did not specify water as a sector, but among various reforms, water reform was there in terms of three broad reforms, which the compliance of which led to the release of the additional central grants. One was rainwater harvesting. The second was reuse of recycled water. The third was the restoration of water bodies. So post that, and that was basically taken up by the 65 mission cities, which included the state capitals, the million-plus cities, and touristic cities. So post that, with Amrut Mission, Amrut 1.0, I think the same reforms were continued, but a few more were added, like making STPs more energy efficient, giving incentives for green buildings, although it is not focused directly on water, but it does talk about sustainability. And Amrut 2 is also does have such reforms, reduction in non-revenue water to below 20%, recycle of treated wastewater, and rejuvenation of water bodies. So, and what at NIUA we means in addition to the measures taken up by the central government and which is percolating down to the city level, at NIUA also I think Dr. Victor Shinde is here. He is leading the water team. We are working very closely with the NMCG and trying to help cities in the preparation of URMPs, urban river management plans. So I think 60 such plans are to be prepared in the next 2 years, 25 first in the Ganga Basin area, and then 35 later in the different other locations. That is one. And also, we are into preparation of climate action plans in 4 cities. And if you talk about, I think one thing we need to take into cognizance before we get down to these details is that how are we also urbanizing? I think when we talk about master plans, we must be cognizant of the fact that not all cities in India do have master plans. Amrut has really taken a lot of effort under Amrut. All class 1 cities, either they have master plans or are in the various stages of preparation of master plans. Amrut 2.0 is taking the canvas of all statutory towns. But beyond statutory towns, we also have at least 5,000 census towns, the peri-urban areas in and around the cities. I think that is one area which are growing very rapidly, because there you do not have the statutory norms. So you can build anything. You can eat away the water bodies. You can cut down the trees because there is no policing at all, right? So that is one area I think where we really need to put our attention in terms of policymakers, in terms of state government officials, the local agencies, and also citizens at large. And when you were asking me what all initiatives have been taken, I think nature-based solutions are coming up in a big way in many cities. I was in Odisha last month, where I did come across cleaning up of existing nalas through nature-based solutions. So that is one thing. And also one very good initiative taken by the Odisha state government is that they will stall the process of declaring census towns into statutory towns till the time those census towns really come up with all urban infrastructure facilities uh, to really being able to cater to all the needs of the urban dwellers. So until and unless this happens, they will stall the process, and they have, I think, they do have a period of 2 years to do so. So they have come up to us asking for a baseline study just now, and maybe at a later point of time, an assessment of how these census towns, which will be notified as statutory towns, how they have improved, the quality of services have improved. And another thing what we found is the drink from water, tap water supply. It has started in a few cities, but they want to scale to all the existing 14 or 24 statutory towns in the state of Odisha. I think such initiatives and what is it? Why does Odisha is able to do so? Why not the other states or other cities? I think we need to understand the dynamics behind that. Where in a city like Delhi, we have just half an hour water supply. In some localities, even not even that. Whereas Cuttack or Puri does have 24/7 provision of not only water, it's potable water, right? Yes. And then if that is possible, maybe there could be some good practices which could be taken up by other cities as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kundu. Orissa keeps popping up now in every conversation, and I think that state is obviously doing something really major. And my own visit to the state, the nerve that I see that they have touched is communities and people at the center as a policy measure. And I think that's something that brings me back to you, Nidhi, in saying that, where you began with feelings, and you have a state also that begins with feelings in that sense. People are all about feelings. Yeah. But how do you see this whole journey that HCL has taken, graduating with your partnerships? So it's not just HCL and your how many thousand volunteers you mentioned? I mean, yeah, humongous number, graduating to become sensitive, but your civil society partners graduating to higher levels of being able to think and design and work with you, as well as your local governments that you work with. So how do you see that influence happening and change?
No, I think very pertinent discussions. And again, I was reflecting upon when, Dr. Kundu was saying about urbanization and the water. I remember in 1999, I took, I was working in the remote. Again, I'll go back to the drought days, and that keeps inspiring to work more and more on water. I traveled home with a water bottle. I was thinking about my brother. He's no more now, but he saw a water bottle in my hand. And I'm talking about Rajasthan. Hardly anyone had seen, once a water bottle will come in house, it will be kept very safely, because people in India were not used to water bottle, And this is not very, very long ago. This is and he said, you are carrying a water bottle? Said, no, I'm working in drought areas and, there's hardly any clean water to drink. And he just made one comment कि हमारे देश में पानी बिकने लगा, जहाँ और वो भी राजस्थान में, जहाँ पे कदम कदम पे प्याऊ होती थी और साफ पानी, कोई तो बीमार नहीं होता था. So why are you carrying water bottle? And that thing struck me like anything, because, as children, we used to have these pyaus and pokhars, and water was managed in those earthen pots. We knew how to manage our water. We knew how to manage our pokhars. Especially Rajasthan, has lots. If you go back to indigenous communities, there'll be separate places. And that struck me somewhere, that whole thing that we knew how to manage our water, and over a time, and that went back to that first publication that we did on water, and of course this one, water is a sense of life, which we launched. So there's a long, I would say, legacy. But of course, none of this could have been achieved without partnerships. And I was just thinking that from marine, where, my colleague Robin is here, he's just returned from Planet Earth, which won the HCL Tech grant recently, and they are cleaning the ocean. There is plastic all over. We are working, in the Gulf of Mannar. We are cleaning it. We are working across, the regions. Of course, the latest news you'll hear about Yamuna, we are championing the basin. Our CEO will be, HCL Tech CEO will be championing the entire basin. Namami Gange, we are there. So I think partnerships, especially public-private partnerships, especially community-based partnerships, partnerships with CBOs in written forms. It's not about just informal partnerships, but water is so serious. It's a war footing kind of a situation. We're not real. I mean, Bangalore news is already there, but we have a Herculean task in front of us. It's not something that we go back from here and we don't pick up an agenda and we don't do something about it. I think action is necessary. It's emergency situation right now. Pick up one pond, pick up one target on water, RO water, huge wastage happening there. And we were talking about high rise. So if that itself could be picked up, but there are two things which I surely, of course, we have partnerships. Development Alternatives has been such an amazing partner, showcasing evidence on ground, because this is the time of evidence-based advocacy. This is not a time where we can just say water is critical. It is a time of action in all its respects. And we know the emergency situation. But I think one aspect, despite n number of partnerships that we have, is state action, a collective action. And there are two things which worry us, especially as CSR investors, is that we are taking up, I think it's almost 200th water body that we have rejuvenated, and we have completely, and in terms of last year the data was 57 billion. This year the data will cross 70 billion liters. But then if the urban planning is not taking cognizance, and we are not marking, and we are not making it legally punishable to bore groundwater, I think we are stealing groundwater, and there has to be a clear guidance. I would rather not hesitate from making a law that we cannot touch groundwater. Because what is happening is we are rejuvenating, and you suddenly see the villages around, they are boring it. The urban communities around are boring it, and there is no punitive measure. At least certain states are not serious about it. And that is not going to encourage corporates to invest in water. We are taking risks. We'll continue to do so. We'll continue to stay committed. But there is a state action and citizens' action necessary, and certain punitive measures may be needed. If not, we don't do that, we will be in an emergency situation. And that's a big advocacy agenda. The second, of course, we are marking not just blue, but greens, the afforestation sites that we are developing. Acres and acres of land we have afforested on risk. What if these trees are cut? What if they are not notified? They can be bird hotspots, they can be butterfly hotspots, but somehow we have to bring them under notified reserves. Because CSR funds, look at the potential, 35,000 crores is available. Can we not, as environment and water lobby, tap into those funds? But corporates will only come forward when this risk is mitigated. Some of us are taking that risk, and we've been able to work with the local authorities, but government orders are needed. They are necessary to protect what is being rejuvenated, what is being built back. So I think those are two important aspects which need to be undertaken. Otherwise, partnerships, I think none of this work, be it in Tamil Nadu or be it in Kerala or in Uttar Pradesh or Karnataka, Maharashtra, we are working. Northeastern region we are working. We have water as our main focus, I would say. And recently, HCL as a group also launched a global grant on aquapreneurs, which is actually supporting innovators in the area of freshwater conservation. HCL Tech went ahead and we are going to announce the results of a climate action grant in the region of Americas. And there's a lot of cross-learning opportunity that is happening. So it's all about partnerships. But then these two, which I just mentioned, actions are needed on an emergency basis.
Thank you. I think you've touched at a very, very important point, and we are part of a group that has been looking at the Green Economy Coalition, that's been looking at now what is an eco-social contract that communities and governments need to renegotiate. And I think you have touched on a very, very significant point on these partnerships are not one way, and they are formal, and they are legal, and therefore they are subject to rights and duties. And I think that is a very, very important thing around partnerships for our ecological resources. With that, I am going to open the floor for people. I'm sure there must be somebody who must be dying to ask. You can ask a question, you can make a comment, you can address an issue. Can I pass the mic around? I think I will stand now.
Hi, thanks for the wonderful conversation. I'm Ramneek from Habitat India, and gratitude to the team at HCL for taking a huge initiative. I've been reading about HCL, and I'm glad that I'm hearing from you. So just as corporates have benchmarking exercises, have corporates reached out to you to understand your blueprint and take you as a benchmark and take your guidance to do their bit? So that's one part. Second is that we're also working with startups in the sustainability space. So the problem which they face, apart from funding, funding is easier now as pre-seed or seed capital, is corporate connects, because they need pilots. They need to showcase to their funds that they are working B2B. That is there that they hit a wall, because corporates do not have those, you can say, KPIs or that stakeholder engagement, which takes these initiatives forward. So how does HCL look at the part of playing, as you just said, as an ecopreneur? And before that, how is it that HCL is like the biggest influencer to take this forward? So I've been interacting with a lot of manufacturing companies. They have not done what you have done. So great to hear from you. Thanks.
Can I hold you for one moment? Maybe there are other questions so that we can take them all together. Do we have any other show of hands? Questions, comments, points of issue? Yes.
Thank you, panelists. That was really enlightening. I'm Brigadier Kapoor. I belong to the Development Alternatives, and I have a very different perspective because of the service that I come from, the background. If I were to just zoom out from here, the Member of Parliament alluded to it briefly when he said that there are some international ramifications to water sharing. The theme for this year's Global Water Day is Water for Peace. There is water wars already on globally, right? There is something called the upper riparian and the lower riparian states. And we happen to be both. In one instance to Pakistan, we are the upper riparian, and in relation to China, we are the lower riparian. We know what happened in the East, and it happens often when the waters are released from the upper riparian China and floods take place. That washes away the silt, and it impacts crop productivity. The rivers are polluted on purpose, because that is the adversarial action adversary takes. Constructions of dams, not releasing water. And we are not holier than thou. Likewise, we do that. You're aware of the Indus Water Treaty of 1960 with Pakistan. We just tweaked it a little in 2016, and there was hell to play. There was hell to play with Pakistan. Everybody came on the diplomatic table. Mrs. Kundu here, you belong to Rajasthan, I presume, but not Kundu, sorry, Ms. Pundhir. We operate in the tanks in Rajasthan, very hot. The temperatures that exist outside are 55 degrees and inside the tanks are 70 degrees, if you may please. In 2000, a company from Israel came for recycling of our perspiration, converting it into drinking water, potable water inside tanks. So the thought process was already there. Israel did it a long time ago, and we had Prime Minister Modi in, I think, 16 or 17 going there when seawater was being converted. So recycling of water appears to be. So these are the two points that I wanted to briefly touch upon.
I have one before we have the panel answer or remark or comment.
Yeah, hi. My name is Sautrik. I'm a research consultant with Center for Budget and Governance Accountability. So I've the first would be a comment. The second is a question regarding climate finance, because that's my domain of work. The first is when we are talking about people, prosperity, and peace. I think one point which we're missing out is the socioeconomic underprivileges. Caste is something I think we cannot miss when we are talking about water, like, because that kind of atrocity has been historically there in India. And till date, people are being killed. In 2022, Wire came out with their entire report. So that would be the first point. And what, as civil society, privates and the government, what can be our stake to, go actually into these deepened hierarchical problems like caste, for example. In Delhi, I go to this place called Kusumpur. It's a place beyond Vasant Vihar, and on one side we have Haus Khas, where it's unlimited water supply. In these places, the water is actually not existent. 3 or 4 days later, one tanker is coming in. So what about these underprivileges? What about the peace perspective there? The second point would be a question for Ms. Mann specifically, because she mentioned climate finance. Now, for part of my work, I went actually through the interim budget. The annual budget is basically giving a huge priority to the mitigation level. And the climate finance is basically, allocating 60%, 70% of the total money which is going over there. That is both for gross budgetary support and the internal, external budgetary resources. The adaptation part is somewhere, still missing out from the public finances and also from the, private finance capital. So how do we, turn our heads to the adaptation and the loss and damage framework? Because India still doesn't have one. And how, from the PPP perspective, can we focus towards that? So that would be my question.
So the panelists, if you want to answer, comment, react, or abstain, all is yours.
Mine is very quick. Thank you very much for the excellent point. I think equity agenda is very critical when we look at all of the SDGs, because the core principle is leave no one behind. So I agree. I mean, as UNICEF, that's another, I would say, we do focus on the most marginalized. It could be children with disability, girls, remote locations, a lot of marginalized segments where they don't have access to clean and safely managed water. So it's a very important point you bring out. Second, in terms of climate finance, UNICEF with partners, did do kind of a review around the commitments, the global commitments around the Paris Agreement, the Convention on Biodiversity, and many other climate kind of frameworks. And it did see that there is a huge advocacy to ensure that climate finance does look strongly at the equity agenda, and we need to do more on both what you mentioned, mitigation, adaptation. So this is where we need to all come together to advocate. And there's huge opportunities, I would say, within the social sector budgets. So although we talk about largely climate finance within the health sector, education sector, the Panchayati Raj, rural development, so the idea is to mainstream and ensure that the climate resilience lens is across, including in the DRR. I think this is where we could see the greater opportunity, where we can unlock some of the funds to direct to social sector. And I would just conclude, I think with and together with children and young people, I think when we talk about the issue of SDG 6 and all SDGs, I think that should be our mantra. If we're really looking at the future generations of India. Currently, we have 460 million children in India that are under the age of 18. And there's a strong economic case to be made because one of the biggest diseases that are causing children to be sick, ill, dying is diarrhea due to unclean water. And this is something that's really easily preventable. And if we actually miss that 0 to 3, I mean, we're actually missing out on investing in the cognitive capital and the social well-being of children. And safe, clean water plays a critical role in terms of children's nutrition, health, education opportunities, learning outcomes. So there's a economic case to be made around investing in children and looking at the issue of SDG 6. Over to you. Okay. I said I would be simple, but I apologies.
No, I think the question that you asked about other corporates, I mean, surely we are approached, but honestly, as much as we are approached for our health projects as demos or education as demos, both afforestation and water, there are very few corporates, the ones who are doing it, possibly they're doing it because of ESG or compliance. But we find very few who are like, we are a tech company, we need not, our water footprint is actually very less because we hardly we're not a water guzzler industry. So there are very few who are doing it who do not have a water footprint. And here I think and you're right, that we should have more and more everybody to work towards water. If I was just going through the national CSR report, the overall investment within environment segment itself is less than 13%. Whereas if you look at education and health, they take the bulk of the pie. So that is because of the risk involved there. And that is where I'm saying, if we are able to give corporates that guarantee that the water body that they will rejuvenate today or a afforestation site they will develop today or grassland that they will develop today, tomorrow will not be eaten by some airport or, some high rise, that guarantee is missing. And therefore, many who have a smaller CSR budget, they kind of find it safe to put it in an education project or something where they can show their auditors what they are doing. Or when the impact assessment happens, they can show it. And that's a big challenge. But we are happy to kind of showcase more and more. And a lot of government, Jal Shakti mission, in fact, when we were given the National Water Award, their officers came and validated everything. And one of the sites was development alternative sites also. They actually came and checked. Tomorrow, Hindustan Times entire team is coming and validating what are we doing, because media houses are interested and they're interested in knowing how have you done it within 3.5 years time. Was it possible? So all we are trying to say through various channels is that it is possible. Put your investment there and work closely with the district authorities. However, the district authorities also do not have the power to notify. The notification powers remain with the state government, and therefore that advocacy is critical. The recycle, I mean, there's no question. I mean, we have to recycle what you mentioned, whichever way we have to surely recycle and conserve our water. And I think your point around the budgeting, see, access to clean drinking water remains a vulnerability indicator. I mean, it is a poverty. I mean, it is one of the indicators. In fact, I was completing my recent research and, I collected data within slums. 85% of the families in slums of Noida were purchasing water, clean water to drink. I can give you the stats. And we were like, this is our Noida. They had to buy drinking water. So just imagine with the daily income of a daily wage earner, if they have to spend on clean drinking water and then plastic and everything. So that's where we are.
So this is not only with Noida, it's in Kusumpur Pahari as well. So most of the poor, because I live very close to Kusumpur Pahari, I live in Vasant Kunj. So the maids there, they get, yes, because potable water is a scarce commodity. Water comes once in 3 or 4 days, and with summers, it becomes more difficult for them to access potable water. So that is there. And I think the reason why these areas are not getting potable water is because they are not recognized.
They are not.
There's the people are not recognized. They are not us. They are they. So that there we ourselves, like the gated communities, we do not allow them to come, right? So there is a small shop very close to the gate across the road where there is a slum. So these people are not allowed to come to get their bread or any other things, because we do not consider them as part
Citizens,
of the city. So until and unless we have that recognition, and Delhi Jal Board, they can only provide them water once these slums are recognized slums, because in the last census we did have this terminological recognized slums. So until and unless these slums are recognized by the Municipal Corporation of Delhi, and then we need also to coordinate with Jal Board that, okay, this is recognized now and you need to supply water. And that may take again a few months or a year, we do not know. So the point which I was making, that we need to get away with the siloed interventions until and unless we have an integrated approach to each and every problem which we face in the cities. I don't think there are solutions right away. It will take time.
Absolutely. I think we home down to the issue of equity, equity, and equity. And I'm going to ask Pat for
Not so much on equity, and I'll be very, very brief. I just wanted to share a thought that's been on our minds in the organization for at least 15 years. I was trying to, think back. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because there's very little I can add to the insights shared by the panelists. But there is, I think, the need for an instrument, for processes, a mechanism that actually would help us, in a sense, establish much greater control over, what we're talking about here. Something that's, really complex and needs to be handled with the kind of instrument that would have an influence across, the entire system that we're talking about. And that's of using the equivalent of balance sheets and income expenditure accounts, right? The one word I didn't hear, and I was trying to listen really carefully, was asset, right? Are we, and we're talking about peace, right, which would come from abundance, right? Are we trying to measure, right, whether water as an asset is available, and whether that asset is growing or not? And a sort of parallel on the income expenditure account side would be, how much are you generating, how much are you spending? And if you look at it, you could actually establish the equivalent of accounting standards, right? Bring in regulation that forces people to do this, with one vital difference, which is the ownership of the enterprise, right? Whose balance sheet are we talking about, right? Who's making the balance sheet? Who's doing the accounting when we're talking about water? And that's where, if you have governments or government bodies, and you have communities, and you have the private sector somewhere in between or orthogonally, I think establishing how that accounting and the preparation of those balance sheets would be done collaboratively by shareholders, right, would be I think something extremely useful to invest in, to commit ourselves to. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. That's bringing in another new perspective of how we could really look at this. But I've been given a notice from the logistics team that we must end. But before you all move on, two things that are remaining. We have Dr. Khosla, which Ashok, if you can sort of in, I don't know, I'm going to give you a challenge, 3 minutes, maybe 10 bullet points, less. Summarize what we heard today, or if not summarize, sort of comment on it. Then we don't want anybody to go away, because I believe there is a release of something that I would request our MC, Swayam Prabha, to be around for. So maybe first Ashok, and then I will move out.
Thank you. All four panelists have raised different facets of the big problem, which is that we're unable to see the systemic nature of the problem. Connecting the various dots is something that we need to do with the institutions, we need to do across problem areas, we need to do between the different sectors, whether it's philanthropy or private sector or public sector or civil society. We're not able basically to put our finger on the need to connect the dots and to understand that without doing that, there are essentially major downsides in areas which may be far removed from the ones that we're concerned with. And there was a great insight that Hyun brought up in the area of the big zoo that exists in everybody's intestinal tract in rural areas. They essentially are feeding 40% of the food they take into their mouth into a zoo of parasites, which prevent them from getting the nourishment of that food, from being able fully to absorb that food, and essentially becoming sick and unable to fully be productive. This is the same issue, whether it's a systemic problem of lack of communications between different levels of government or different silos in government, and all the other things that we've been hearing about. There's so many examples of the breakdown in getting an optimal solution that one really has to recognize that it all begins with government officials, whether they're politicians or administrators, being trained to really absorb and understand what system dynamics are, how basically we affect each other in ways that, I'll give you an example. Dr. Kundu mentioned 24/7. It's a subject that's one of my favorites, because the natural tendency of government, whoever it may be, whatever level it may be at, is something is scarce, ration it, cut it off. The water in your pipes is scarce, so just turn it off, and people won't get it, and you won't have any problem. But in fact, that's the exact opposite of what you should be doing. What she was talking about was 24/7 water available, which then prevents leakages and losses and rises of other things. And it turns out, if you do your systems work, that you actually use less water. Cambodia, Phnom Penh, the capital city of Cambodia, has 24/7 water, one of the poorest cities in the world, and they have no shortage of water at all. Ever. It's 24/7 by 365. They have water all the year round, and so do a number of places in the subcontinent. Kathmandu. We had a little project. DA sent out a team of people to Nhava Sheva, to New Bombay, to Hubli Dharwar, and to Nagpur. The only three places which had 24 had aspiration. They didn't even have fully implemented projects on 24/7. And the amazing stories we came back with on the impacts on the lives of the people, particularly of the girls, particularly of the housewives, was amazing. One of the most beautiful stories was that the amount of theft during the morning hours when people were going out to fetch their water had gone down by 90%, because they didn't have to leave their house open for thieves to come in. These are systems issues. They don't always have an impact on water, or they may not have an impact because of water. But in the end, the insights they provide are actually going to have an impact on people's health. We've fallen into the trap, which governments seem to like, which is alliteration. We were stuck to only words beginning with a P, but actually the word that we really need is well-being. Water and well-being are the kind of issues, well-being for all. Well-being for those Kusum Pahari people as well as for the Vasant Vihar people. We're talking about a mindset. We're worried about peace because the rich do not like strife. They don't like to live in communities where there is not adequate peace. So it's a mindset problem. We're worried about peace. We've got to start worrying about well-being, about productivity, about being able to be healthy, to be able to get productive work and earn a decent living. Those are all that come with clean water. There were a lot of things, but she's given me 3 minutes and I've used 2 of them already. My worry about our conversation is that we talk a lot about partnerships and they don't seem to happen. There's obviously a certain resistance on the part of pretty well everybody we not want to bring together, whether they're on the lower end or the top end. So we need to identify what is it that good governments are good for and get them to do that. And what are the things that NGOs are good for and get them to do that. And it seems to me that partnerships is a motherhood statement. I mean, it's obviously a good thing. But if you're not going to get partnerships happening on their own, then we've got to figure out a way that people work on their own to do that. For example, citizen science is a good way not only to train kids on science and being aware of what their impact is on their surroundings, on their environment, and their communities, but to be able also to contribute knowledge, data, information. And it's possible to have programs in which we use this incredible resource that we have, the asset of human activism on the part of small citizens, little kids, who go out there and get information on the quality of environment that they're subjected to. And that alone would open up huge potential support for the right kind of stuff. So I'm afraid I was only given 3 minutes and I've used nearly all of it up. So I'm going to give back my microphone.
And the mic to Dr. Swayamprabha, thanking our esteemed panelists once again. And I think she still wants you to be on the stage because she wants you to unveil something very.
Okay. We've been talking water. And I think it'll be a little unjustified if we can't put our thoughts into little spaces that we have. So at DA, we thought that we'll bring everybody together to an ebook. And this ebook, what we have designed is up here for the dignitaries to unveil. This is going to be a living document, and it has to be a promise from all of you to be writing a small piece for us. So that is a request and an ask from the panelists to write on water. And may I invite all our dignitaries and Dr. Khosla, if you could unveil this ebook. Yes, please, if you could. And this is going to be a living document. And it will be available on our website from 22nd of March. We are still collecting entries. So there are lots of people who want to keep on adding more to it. Okay, water, anywhere, a kingdom for a drop. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. So we have got one. You need to go forward, please. One more. So that's the reflections. Water for peace for all of you. These are the themes. So please feel free to choose these themes. It's a living document. So it's going to be there, and please contribute. One more click for you, please. So here is the call for entries. Here's the scanner code, the QR code, and we will also be sharing with all of you going forward. Thank you so much. And thank you for a very enriching and a very engaging conversation. I really cannot thank you much more than from the depth of my heart for being here. We have another event. The third part of today's event is a Dastan going on water. So please join us. So we are not letting you go. So we're going to escort you to our open air auditorium. And it's a young team. And we hope to be there. And we have a little felicitations for our speakers. So please, may I request everyone to just hold on for a second. Zeenat, we need to felicitate our speakers, please. So, yeah. Dr. Nidhi Pundhir, thank you for being here with us today. Thank you. Dr. Khosla, if you could felicitate. Dr. Debolina Kundu, thank you for being here, ma'am. It could be. Give it to me. Thank you, Ms. Huen Hee-wan. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you. We deeply appreciate your time and such an enriching discussions. Please join us for the Dastan Goi on water, which is being, we want a group photo, sorry. Yes, we have to stand here. Sorry, I'm bringing everybody back to this stage. Zeenat, we'll need you here for the photograph, please.